Despite the lack of national media coverage, Miami has been one of the best overperforming teams in the NBA. So why isn't Erik Spoelstra getting consideration for the Coach of the Year award? And is Pat Riley looking to upgrade the point guard position? If so, there are two candidates that could be options for Miami. All that and the latest updates on Jimmy Butler's injury and his return to the court on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucaneat.com. Joining me as always, it's longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We'll get to Erik Spoelstra's Coach of the Year case and a couple of trade targets that have popped up that the Heat could be interested in later on. But let's start, David, with Jimmy Butler, who on Tuesday spoke to the media for the first time since injuring his foot in Utah on December 30th. Butler actually said he was afraid that the injury was much more severe at first, but that he's just thankful that it's just the foot or the toe injury that he's dealing with now. He said that he's not at a place where he can run or jump without pain, but hopes to get there soon. We got the sound right here.
I just think I don't believe in luck all the time. I just think stuff happens. But we're doing everything we can to get me back on the floor. I can't say that. I'm moving better. I can break a little sweat. I promise I'll be ready to go when I can.
Did you know something was wrong as soon as you mentioned you kind of stepped wrong in Utah?
Yeah,
Did you?
I actually thought it was way worse than it really was. I was scared for a much larger reason because of a bruise or a bone, whatever you want to call it. I'm just so glad it wasn't like myself and some other people's may have thought.
So when you hear that, what do you think, David?
I think it sucks, to be honest with you. I think the fact that he's grateful that it wasn't so bad, but I have concerns, and I've mentioned those before, and I continue to do so. Like, this shouldn't have been this severe an injury that took him out, something like this. And now we're starting to see, like he like the way he makes it seem as a positive. I'm just able to break a sweat. That's not a positive. Like, this seems indicative of like somebody who's going to be missing a lot more time, and might take some time in order just to return to normalcy. And the Heat have been dealing with this all season long. Like, he missed the entirety of the preseason. And we just recently got quotes from his agent saying, well, he's been on a long playoff run. Of course he's going to be injured, but he's missed time since the slow ramp up at the start of the season. Miami struggled as a result. Then he missed time again, and now he's missing more time. And I just continue to think, my big concern, and maybe I'm just indoctrinated into Heat culture, right? The regular season doesn't matter. It's just let me know when Jimmy's healthy in April and if he's able to score 40, 50 points against the Milwaukee Bucks. But is that realistic anymore? Like, we cannot continue to count, nor can the Heat especially continue to count on Jimmy Butler being able to be that productive. And if he's talking about these nagging injuries and everything else like that, I'm not necessarily a kind of doom and gloom sort of guy. In fact, I think I'm pretty optimistic in general when it comes to this team.
Yeah.
But that does not sound great to me. Like, the fact that he's dealing with this and is just able to break a sweat. God, give me a break. Like, at this point in time, when is he ever going to get on the floor again?
He's 34 years old. And I kind of got on here hoping that you would be the optimist, because I kind of came away with the same thing. And now that you're not being very optimistic, now I'm even more pessimistic than where I was getting into this thing. So, look, you're right. He's 34 years old. It's been one thing after another. He even said, he's like, I don't believe in luck, but sometimes things just don't go your way, which I was like, okay, like whatever, that's semantics. But he clearly looks at this as sort of an unlucky break as opposed to maybe wear and tear based on the fact that he is 34 years old and he has played a lot of minutes over the course of his career. But if it's the calf strain that kept him out for 4 games before that, you mentioned the injury in the preseason. It's one thing to be very cautious with your star player. It's another thing when it kind of feels like a Kawhi Leonard situation, the way that it was for these last couple of years. And of course, Kawhi got healthy, but Kawhi's also younger than Jimmy Butler, so it's not a great comparison. But the Clippers just couldn't never count on him to be available, and it kind of it ruined 2 seasons, at least 2 or 3 years. It ruined for the Clippers, and I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen for Miami. That's too much of an extreme. But we're going on now a dozen days with Jimmy Butler not being able to even practice. We're not not talking about a game, we're talking about practice, right? Like he's not even practicing. He's on the side of the practice today, just taking standstill jumpers, like barely moving, like not even practicing layups. And when he says that he can't run or jump without excruciating pain, which is what he went on to tell us on Tuesday afternoon, we're not even at the point where we're ramping up to when he's going to start to play. And of course, that ramp up takes another couple of days to get into basketball shape. Again, he can't run or jump. And as great as the shape that Jimmy Butler keeps himself in, when you're not running or jumping, you're gonna lose your wind, and you're not gonna be in game shape after what's going on 2 weeks now. And who knows how much longer it's going to take before you even can start that ramp up process. So in terms of when it is that Jimmy Butler is going to be back in a Heat uniform and playing for them, I don't know. And I think that part is concerning. Now, if we do want to spin it positive, David, the Heat have won more of their games than they have lost with Jimmy Butler out of uniform. Jaime looks great. Nikola Jovic is in the starting lineup. Other guys are starting to come back. Kyle Lowry went down. Caleb Martin is still out. But I don't know. I guess the positive so far would at least be, well, you haven't exactly needed him to be in fourth place in the East right now.
Yeah, no, it's all fair. And again, maybe there's still that overarching kind of idea or notion. You know what? He'll come back. He'll play some games. He'll miss some time down the road again. He'll take the All-Star break because he probably won't be picked to go to Indiana. And then we'll see what happens in April. And then if he turns it on, as he always does, or as he historically has done since he joined Miami, then maybe all those concerns will get swept under the rug. But you're talking about an aging player, and I think we're starting to see, if not the beginnings of the ends, beginnings of a very concerning trend that have derailed players of his age and skill set in the years past.
Doesn't do great for him when he's going into a summer where he's eligible for an extension either, right? These injury things don't bode well for him. You mentioned the All-Star case, any NBC awards, all those things. He was actually asked about that, about whether or not this matters to him. He just, you know the answer to that. You think I care about some bleeping award? And that was pretty much the end of that conversation. But I think when you look at what this means also for the Heat going forward, and we're going to get to this later on, but it might make more sense to make a move before the trade deadline if you feel like you're going to be missing 20 to 22 points per game from Jimmy Butler, because we could talk about all the Heat culture-y things about setting hard screens and rebounding and getting turnovers and playing good defense and playing in the zone and whatever. Right. But at the end of the day, you need somebody to put points on the board. And Miami's biggest problem this year, well, they've had a couple of issues, but sometimes they just can't score. And if you're already going to be without Jimmy Butler for whatever amount of time that this is going to be, and again, I don't pretend to know, and there's no real solid reporting. If anybody tells you that they know how long Jimmy Butler is going to be out, they're lying, because even Jimmy Butler doesn't know, because this is all a pain tolerance thing. And he wakes up every day, monitors the foot, and says, okay, can I run or jump today without excruciating pain? And that's how this is going to go until it kind of goes away and he's able to get back onto the court. So does it make more sense then for them to make a move? Or, David, I would say, I can't imagine that you would just punt and say, well, if Jimmy's not healthy, then we have no chance anyway, because you're hoping, like you said, that he will be healthy for the ramp up. And I don't think anybody expects this to be an issue that goes into the playoffs.
I'll be honest with you. I tend more to see it from the latter perspective. I think you're not going to be able to replicate what Jimmy does. That superstar trade isn't available before the trade deadline. And that being the case, if you can't get somebody that's on the par of, say, a Dame Lillard, which is why that pursuit took place over the summer, or a Donovan Mitchell, or anybody else along those lines that's going to raise the ceiling of this team that significantly this year, Miami will go into the trade deadline with the same approach they've had in years past, that this team is enough, because they're going to have to figure it out, because it doesn't really matter if Jimmy can't go anyway. So there's no point in doing, like, the acquisition of any of the players that we'll talk about this segment or over the next month before the trade deadline won't really be, like, there won't be saviors for this franchise. They'll be complimentary role players.
Complimentary, in hopes that Jimmy Butler eventually does get back onto the court and is healthy. And by the way, all of this, I think they do have a cautious approach with Jimmy, just like they did with Bam and all these things, because their eye is at being, the healthiest they possibly can be by the time that the playoffs roll around. Other updates really quick. Kyle Lowry, Caleb Martin, doubtful for Wednesday night's game against the Thunder. Lowry is listed with that hand injury, so he's doubtful, kind of also with him, monitoring him day to day. So TBD on that. No timetable for his return either. But coming up, should Erik Spoelstra be getting more consideration for Coach of the Year given all of these injuries? I'll actually tell you why he should be the favorite for Coach of the Year after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is wrapping up. Well, basically wrapped up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, whether you win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet. You can have live same-game parlays. You can find more bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. The best way to find popular parlays, and there's so much more. Have you come down from your optimism that the Dolphins are going to be able to beat the Chiefs somehow in Kansas City to start the playoffs?
We just signed Justin Houston for a backup defensive end.
There you go. That's it. That's the move. That's the move.
It helps. I'm not backing down. Last time I checked, the Chiefs were 3.5-point favorites at home. I think even Vegas is giving the Dolphins a lot of respect here. I still like the Dolphins. Let's go.
Yes, but you know better. You suffered the PTSD. You know exactly what it takes. You know what's going to happen.
Every time they think I'm out, they suck me back in.
So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL.
Welcome back to Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. David, we need to have a conversation about Erik Spoelstra and why I think he should be considered the front runner for Coach of the Year. Right now, according to FanDuel's odds, he's 11th to win the award. An award, by the way, that he has never won before. The favorite, according to FanDuel Sportsbook, Mark Dagnall of Oklahoma City at plus 130. Minnesota's Chris Finch at plus 250. Orlando's Jamal Mosley at plus 750. A few other coaches, and the Erik Spoelstra all the way down at 11th at plus 8,500. All right, so he's on the board because he's one of 30 NBA head coaches, but he's not really considered in the mix here. And I think that that's ridiculous. If he's not going to be your betting favorite, I get it. I think what the job Dagnall has done has been awesome. Ditto for Chris Finch, double ditto for Jamal Mosley, right? And if I had to vote between any of those three guys, I'd probably pick Mosley over Dagnall or Finch. But if I really could, if I were going to vote for anybody right now, I think I would vote Spo. And I don't think he's being considered enough for this thing. First of all, he has dealt with more adversity than any of those other coaches at all. And maybe the closest one would be Jamal Mosley because they've had their own injuries and they're dealing with the Franz Wagner thing now, and they've dealt with some real injuries. Oklahoma City, they've been great, and I don't mean to take anything away from them, but when you talk about adversity, Spoelstra has dealt with a ton, okay? He's considering that the Heat are 4th place in the Eastern Conference, and they have missed Bam for 10 games, Butler for 10 games going on more, Tyler Hero for 18 games. Those are just your star players, right? They've also missed, to Darvin Ham's point, some of their role players. Caleb Martin for 16 games. Haywood Highsmith for 14 games. Those guys were projected starters, and whether it was going to be Caleb or Highsmith at the 4. Josh Richardson, who has started games for Miami this year, he's missed 9 games. They've had to use 19 different lineups because of these injuries. They have 120 combined missed games due to injury this season. That's the 4th most in the NBA this year. In that bottom 5 in terms, or top 5, however you want to word it, the teams with the 5 most games missed: Memphis, Charlotte, Detroit, Miami, and Portland. The only one out of that list that even has a winning record, let alone right now home court in the first round of the playoffs, is Miami. Right. And I think that speaks volumes about the job that Spoelstra has done, and the fact that it has gone so under the radar almost also proves my case, because we're just so used to seeing this from Erik Spoelstra. Really quick, again, looking at some of these other injuries, Oklahoma City, they have missed the fewest games in the league due to injury. They have an MVP legit candidate, not like one of those fake candidates. Like, we got to mention him. Like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a legit candidate, 3rd on the MVP Kia ladder thingy that NBA.com does right now. As of this week, they've only missed 22 games due to injury, and very few of them to their star players. Chet Holmgren is going to steal Rookie of the Year from Victor Wembanyama because he's been sensational. Heck, he's got an all-star case for them. Jalen Williams has been great. that roster, I think Oklahoma City's roster, Minnesota's roster, even Orlando's roster, you can argue all of those are more talented groups than what the Heat have, which sounds crazy considering that Miami was in the finals last year, but I don't think that it is. Minnesota has Towns, Gobert, Anthony Edwards, McDaniels. Orlando's got a bunch of talent across the board. All these teams are super talented. I'm not saying that the Heat aren't, but their most talented players have missed a huge portion of their games this year. And so I think when you kind of compare it and you actually sit here and make a case, not only do I think Erik Spoelstra deserves to be squarely in the mix here, I think he should be the bona fide, with a bullet, front runner for Coach of the Year right now.
Excellent case. Well stated. And none of it matters. I think it ultimately, not look, again, I believe you. I know that Spo, but we're saying something that we say every year. Like, there isn't a year in which Spo cannot be considered a Coach of the Year because he's always gotten his teams to overperform, with the exception of maybe the Big Three era, right? And that's held against him because he had one of the more talented teams in the group, and he wasn't able to just clinch 4 straight finals.
Yeah. And there was a couple lottery years after that too. You know, the stuff was going on, Chris Bosh, all that kind of stuff. You know,
sure, yeah, but I mean, he's never going to get the consideration. I think he's just a product of
that. Why do you say he'll never get the consideration? Is this again like one of those things that you say that the national media never respects him? Because I think the one
no.
Okay,
I think they respect the hell out of him, but he's just a product of a franchise that's viewed as more machine than man. It's singular Terminator-like entity that just keeps churning out playoff appearances, keeps churning out new role players where none existed before.
But Spoelstra gets the credit for that. I think even
he
like
gets some credit.
People who vote on
the whole
thing.
thing. But how it's credit, and you're going to divide that credit evenly. Is it Jimmy Butler? Is it Bam Adebayo doing his yeoman-like work? Is it Pat Riley and Adam Simon in the front office? Is it somebody different, or is it just the organization and Heat culture? Like, these things all kind of chip away. Think of it as a pie, right? You know, not blame pie necessarily, but credit pie in this sense. And all those different aspects of what makes this Heat organization so special and so unique get a slice of that pie. And so when it comes to any one individual, you can't look at one individual being responsible for this.
But you
success.
Literally could say that about any candidate. Is Dagnall's job him, or is it Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being maybe the best guard in the NBA right now?
Yeah, but it's also overperforming against the weight of expectation and what that team was supposed to be.
And that's why I make the point. And that's why this team was in the finals. So getting the 4th seed in the East should not be considered overperforming expectations. But I would argue it is because they were in the play-in tournament last year. And the only reason they got to the finals last year is because the most dominant force on the Eastern Conference side of the bracket was Erik Spoelstra. Just like Nikola Jokic was the most dominant force in the West going through that playoff bracket, Spo was the most dominant force consistently. After you got past the first round and a half, where Jimmy Butler was the most dominant force, it was Spoelstra for the balance of the Eastern Conference bracket. And I think people are catching on to his powers now because the GM survey before the year unanimously voted the best coach in almost every aspect of that survey. I don't know. I think I understand the point that you're making in terms of where does the credit begin and you're absolutely right. Like, we have historically had a hard time with Spo back then. I mean, look, I went back and went through, okay, what were the years he got snubbed? Because it sounds crazy that he's number 1 coach of the year, right? But specifically, what years did he get snubbed? Okay. So the Heat got the number 1 seed in the East 2 years ago, 2021, 2022. They had 53 wins.
Yep.
I think you could have made a strong argument that he should have won it that year. But at the same time, and nobody here is saying that Monty Williams is a better coach than Spo, but that year, the Suns won 11 more games with Monty Williams as coach. It's really, as the number 1 seed in the West, 11 more games. That's in a harder conference. So I get it. Snub might be strong, although I thought Spo should have deserved stronger consideration for that. And I don't really remember him getting a ton of consideration for it, but you can't really dispute Monty Williams winning it that year. They won
again. They had gone to they had gone to the finals just 2 years prior, and there was the shortened COVID season and everything else like that. So that
was the other year. The Heat got to the finals in 2020, but they were on pace in the regular season for less than 50 wins.
You were covering the Warriors at the time, or you weren't covering the Warriors at the time, and I know as a fan you were still watching Heat basketball and basketball in general.
Oh, I wasn't because they were not in the playoffs. I see what you mean. Yeah, I was like, what?
Yeah, but think about the coverage of that team. It's like There's no better team built for this. This was a team that was built for this. Jimmy Butler dribbling, people's heads at 3 a.m. and growing beards out and pictures of their families and the little waiting areas. They were never going to get that consideration. And I'll tell you something else. I know you can go
it's not a postseason award. That's the point.
But you can, but that whole thing didn't count. I mean, they shut down the league in February. What are you going to do? Or March, excuse me.
No, I know, but even whatever Spoelstra did in the bubble literally didn't matter because it didn't matter because it's a regular season award. Can I go two more times where he got snubbed?
Sure.
Got a lot of respect in 20. Well, let me go back. Actually, 2012, 2013.
66 and 16. Get out of here.
66 and 16, 27 game win streak. That was the year he got snubbed. That was it. Denver's George Karl won Coach of the Year because he won games without some games, not 66, because Carmelo Anthony left. All right. And people actually underappreciated how talented that roster was when Melo left and what they got back. That was a good team. So he got totally snubbed that year. But we did have a harder time even then sort of deciphering what the difference is between Spoelstra and just
MVP
an awesomely
LeBron.
Talented team.
Yeah.
And so I get that, but 66 wins is a lot. I think the year he really got snubbed, or not snubbed, again, that's not the right word, but the other year where he had a case for Coach of the Year, 2015-16, 2 years after LeBron leaves, the Heat get to the third place in the Eastern Conference. But what happened on the other side of the league? Steve Kerr's Warriors won 73 freaking games. So nobody was getting Coach of the Year other than Steve Kerr, even though Spo had a solid case that year as well.
Yeah.
It is a little funny that if you break the record, we'll give you Coach of the Year, even though you've got you didn't have Kevin Durant at that point. It was Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and all these guys. So it is very much sort of perception. But I think he got snubbed that 1 year during the Big Three, the 66 win year. He should have won it that year. It's hard to make the case that he got snubbed outright any other year, but it's still crazy that he hasn't won it. And I think he should win it this year. If we could vote right now, I think he should win it this year.
I'm going to tell you something else. And I think I speak for some Heat fans, maybe a lot of them. And I probably speak for some people in the Heat organization, absolute sickos. I freaking love it. Screw your Coach of the Year. Don't respect us. Hate us every time. Count us out because it doesn't matter. We're going to still go in there and kick you right in the goddamn teeth, and you're not going to see it coming. You're going to be like, oh, what the hell? How does this team keep doing it? Keep crying your tears. Who cares? It doesn't really matter. We're going to keep finding a way. That's the way it works in that organization. I love it personally, as a fan of basketball and this style. Like, individual awards are fantastic. I'd love Bam to get a Defensive Player of the Year, but I think it drives him to show everybody why he's a great defensive player even more. And I think Spo is the same way. Oh, you know
what would Spo do if he actually won Coach of the Year? Would he just pull a Jimmy Butler and just not smile, take the trophy, say thank you very much? And then
thank the teams. You thank the team, the players.
Yeah, this is about the players and it's about the organization. Never could. Oh, you're right. I don't even want him to win the award because that would just make. I just want somebody to enjoy winning something. It's okay to want individual things, people. It's okay. It's okay, and it could jive with Heat culture. It's fine. It's okay.
Team ethos. You can't. You got to just sacrifice individuality. Check your ego at the door, Wes. Heat culture.
I can't do it. My ego's too big. It doesn't fit through the door. Are the Heat sneakily scanning the trade market for an upgrade? There are rumblings that suggest that they might. We talk about what names they could be targeting after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Betterhelp. Look, it's the New Year's, right? A lot of people make resolutions, and one of those resolutions is kind of, focusing on, a lot of those resolutions are focusing on these things that you want to change about yourself, or you want to focus on this, or maybe you want to achieve that goal or that dream. Those are all fantastic goals, and absolutely they should be made. But at the same time, you can just accept who you are. And if you want help in coming to grips with the person you are, you want to have questions about why you do the things that you do, or you just want to talk to somebody else, whether it's about good things, bad things, or everything in between, that's what therapy can do. And if you're looking to try a therapist and you want to find a solution, then BetterHelp is the solution for you. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and it's suited to your schedule. You fill out a brief questionnaire, and you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Celebrate the progress you've already made this new year. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today. You get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen. every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Zach Lowe on his podcast yesterday mentioned that he expects the Heat to be in the market for a guard. And there are growing rumblings around the league that the Heat will look to add another piece before next month's trade deadline. Lowe mentioned two names that I want to ask you about specifically, David. Terry Rozier and Tyus Jones. Depending on the cost, any of those names move the needle for you?
Can I, sorry, I know this is a complete pivot and we didn't discuss this beforehand. I got two questions for you, if you don't mind answering those. One, and I think a lot of listeners, or at least based on some of the comments we received, warrant the kind of answering of this question. Why are we digging into trades for this team? Because one, I don't think it's realistic that the team is looking for a trade, but I think also we said at the start of the year that we would kind of try to avoid trade talk in general.
Yeah.
But why do you think
it's not
trade
the only resolution I already broke?
Yeah, I know. So yeah, I just want to give it an opportunity to kind of, talk about it and say, you know what, this is why.
Because the deadline's a month away. And I do believe the reports that the Heat are looking at moves. I don't think that the Heat are averse to making trades mid-season. And if anything, it would be weird if they weren't doing their due diligence. It doesn't mean just because they're maybe having conversations, and we don't know, by the way, that they're having conversations specifically about Tyus Jones or Terry Rozier, but it would be really weird if they just ignored the trade deadline. Like, that's not what this front office does that is so detail-oriented. And so why are we having these conversations? It's because the Heat are probably having some versions of these conversations.
Absolutely.
And so when we're trying to figure out what are the Heat going to do before the deadline, they do have options. This is not a perfect team. Just because you think you have enough doesn't mean that you also just rest on those laurels. Like, I don't think that that's at all what Heat culture is either. Just be like, nah, we're good. Like, they're always, the whole thing with Heat culture too is we're always looking for more. We're always wanting to push. And I think if there's a deal that makes sense out there where you're not taking a bunch of long-term money back,
right,
then I think that these conversations are warranted. I think a couple of years ago we saw this where they made a little minor moves because they thought that they needed a little extra something to get over the hump. And they brought in Andre Iguodala, Jay Crowder, that whole group, and they made a push to the finals. Even last year, we tend to think, they didn't make any trades. They had enough the whole time. They got Kevin Love on the buyout market. He played a major role in what it is the Heat were able to do getting to the finals. So this is a team that's going to be looking for additions, and that's why we're having these talks.
Fair enough. I wanted you to clear out and clarify that because I know a lot of people say, oh, you guys said you weren't going to talk about trades. Trades are a realistic component of any NBA media coverage. Plus, this team, I think it's misinformed by some fans that think this team doesn't make midseason trades. They have, as you said, the Crowder trade. Goran Dragic.
I literally read the other day.
Yeah.
The Heat don't make trades. They have not made a midseason trade since 2021. I saw that in an article. I was like, what year do you think we're in now?
It hasn't been that long ago. Yeah, I know.
That was crazy. To your point, Goran Dragic was a big trade. They'd moved 2 first-round picks thinking that he was a third star next to D. Wade and Chris Bosh. That's a major midseason trade. This team is always looking. They tried to trade for Kevin Durant last year. They just didn't.
Yeah.
So this team wants to make a move. This team has been trying to make a trade for the better part of 3 years now. They just haven't been able to do it. It doesn't mean that they're not going to keep trying to do it. Am I sorry that I broke my resolution? Yes. Is it this resolution I'm sorriest for breaking? No. I thought I was going to have dry January. You know how long that lasted? 1 day. So there we go.
Okay. My second question then. Why is it that you think that they're acquiring an offensive-minded guard? Like, well, the names that you'll mention in a second, notwithstanding. Like, I tend to think that this organization is probably better suited by making a defensive-minded acquisition.
I only mentioned Terry Rozier and Tyus Jones because that's who Zach Lowe mentioned, and I'm assuming that that's coming with some sort of either educated guess or some sort of background reporting around it. To be clear, Lowe isn't saying like the Heat are actively pursuing Tyus Jones or Terry Rozier. That's not what he said on the show. But he also, is plugged in, and I'm assuming that those names are coming from something, if not only for the reason that those players are available. Tyus Jones is on an expiring contract. The Wizards are going nowhere fast. It makes sense that they would try to get a second-round pick or two for him before he walks away in free agency because he's going to. He doesn't want to share a backcourt with Jordan Poole anymore, and he's a good player. And then in Charlotte's case, I think they're not good, and I think they're actively trying to offload Terry Rozier's contract, which has 2 more years remaining after this. But I think at a fine number at around $22 million a year, which actually is right at that number that would make sense if Miami were to take on long-term salary. It would still fit below the luxury tax. That's like the kind of dollar figure that they could take on and still kind of stay out of the woods in terms of luxury tax risk. over the next couple of years. So I think that's a name that makes sense. And in terms of why they would not pursue a defensive guard, what's the one that's available? Is it Malcolm Brogdon? Maybe. How much is that moving the needle? Are you really moving a first-round pick for Brogdon? I don't think so. So Marcus Smart, I just don't know that Memphis is ready to move off of him, but maybe they are. I don't know. They traded a first-round pick for him. I don't know that they're willing to just give up, even though they could use some salary cap space. There might be other ways. They might try to offload Steven Adams' salary.
Yeah,
try to create salary that space that way. But I just don't know who the defensive guard is available. Alex Caruso, everybody wants to point to. He's not like the Bulls aren't trading him, I don't think. So
not for the kind of price tag that a lot of people think. You can't
unless,
trade that particular.
Unless they get like 2 first-round picks, and Miami's not moving their only 2 first-round picks for Alex Caruso because they're saving those for the star that might become available between now and next summer. So I don't know.
Of the 2 names there, I kind of tend to prefer the volatility and inflammability of Terry Rozier.
Really? I'm surprised by that. I thought you would go Tyus Jones.
No, I got to be honest with you. I don't think either of them are particularly great, and they're solid in different ways. But I think Rozier is more of that kind of big time scorer. That if you're going to lean that way, you're going to say, you know what, rather than just a steady hand like Tyus that does everything pretty good as opposed to doing anything particularly great, I think you could the idea of Rozier providing that occasional spark and finding a way to fit in as that occasional spark probably raises Miami's ceiling just enough. Tyus, that's like, I don't think that's a significant upgrade over Kyle Lowry. I know a lot of people think I'm crazy, but I don't honestly see it as a huge upgrade.
I think I'm with you on that. Tyus Jones is shooting 44% from 3-point range this year, so that's a good mark. It's not at a
limited
ton of volume. Yeah, it's 3.7 attempts per game, but that's more than Kyle Lowry's taking. And he's averaging 12.7 points per game. Defensively, he's okay, but to your point, he's also undersized. He's only 6'1", not at a long wingspan. Rozier's like 6'2", 6'3", but he's got one of those like freakishly long wingspans where he's like almost like a 6'9", 6'10" wingspan. Like it's crazy what he does. And he had some years in Boston where he was actually a good defender. And so I think he still has it in him. At least he's got the frame for it where Tyus Jones doesn't. What's weird is that if you ask me in a vacuum, which player do I prefer? I think it's Tyus Jones hands down. But and I remember talking with people in Memphis last year when he was playing for them, and I was like, "Why do you guys keep winning without John Morant?" And they're like, "Tyus Jones. That's the only reason. Is he's that good, and he makes winning plays. Not for Washington because it's really hard to win there, but generally speaking." But I like Rozier for this Heat team better as a fit. I like the idea of having a guy who could just go off for 22 points on any given night. I mean, he's averaging 24 points per game this year. The shooting splits are fine overall, but as a 3-point shooter, he's good. He's a 37% basically career 3-point shooter. He can rebound for you. He can get like a steal per game, and he can play make. He's averaging 7.2 assists per year per game this year. He was at 5 last year in a little bit of a lesser role. I like Rozier, and if it were and I think it would actually cost you maybe only Lowry. I don't know what it would cost if you're the Hornets and you're trying to salary dump him, and you're Miami. You say, hey, here's Lowry's expiring. We'll take Rozier off your hands. Do you even have to attach a draft pick to it? I don't know.
It's he's a Dwayne guy, so that's a big thing too. I think that's a factor to consider. Like he and Dwayne are they were close. They have a friendship, etc. Tyus being a Duke guy and with a strong Duke presence in the front office too. I think that's also something to consider. And look, Mitch Kupchak, the GM for the Charlotte Hornets, he played for Pat Riley. Yeah, for now, but he played for Pat Riley, so that's something to consider. I thought of Rozier and like, oh, why would it interdivisional rival trade a player but I don't think it matters. Like I don't think Charlotte sees themselves as a competitor. It's like, oh, we don't want Terry Rozier, Scary Terry, to come back and kill us.
To your point, it might be why you don't like a DeJounte Murray trade doesn't work is because Atlanta is a legit rival in your division. Maybe a trade. I don't know that Orlando has any pieces that Miami wants, but sort of same idea, just generally speaking. But to your point, like Charlotte's going nowhere fast. I think they'll just take the salary dump if they could take it. And I don't think they're necessarily worried about Terry Rozier coming back and killing them.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. I think both names are interesting and could provide something. And I just see Tyus Jones kind of fitting in, and not the same player. And I'm going to be clear about that, but kind of like what Gabe Vincent has, where he was a guy who is a much more secondary, maybe even a tertiary role. And if he can find his opportunity to come up big, he will. And I like the point that you just made about why he was able to thrive in Memphis and keep them along their winning ways. That seems like a clear fit here. But again, I don't know, something about Rozier, and I've been on, we've seen too many games where he just goes off.
Yeah.
Scary Terry is a real thing. You're going to see a lot of good points. You're going to see a lot of bad ones too. So it's just something that you have to accept. But if you want that kind of volatility, just because it raises the ceiling a little bit for this team, I think I'd prefer him on this team.
I'm surprised that you and I agree on that. We'll see what happens.
It's shades of Dion Waiters too. I just like
a little like he's got like some late game cojones though. Terry Rozier does. Like I like.
Yeah.
I'm updating this whiteboard for those on YouTube that could see. I got this whiteboard in the back.
No, you gotta hide that. You don't want your rival podcast seeing.
Not us. Nope. We're transparent here. We're letting Heat fans know exactly what the thinking is in that front office with this whiteboard that's directly from their front office. That's reporting. That's reporting right there. No. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast app. We'll be back Wednesday night with a recap of Miami's game against the Thunder.